We will now have keynote speeches under the theme of measures against counterfeit product and public-private partnerships by 3 speakers. Facing the stage from the left side, Ms. Nabarat Tankamaras, Director of International Affairs Office, Department of Intellectual Property. Next, from Singapore, Ms. Serena Dassel Chin, Head of Legal Carousel Group, a private company engaged in C2C e-commerce platform in Southeast Asia. Also from Singapore, Mr. Vignesh Vaan, a lawyer partner of Allen and Glidle, engaged in anti-counterfeiting practices. First, Ms. Nabarato Tankamaras, Director of the International Affairs Office, Department of Intellectual Property, will deliver a keynote address. Ms. Tankamaras, please.
Good afternoon, distinguished panelists and honored participants. Today is my honor to participate and be a keynote speaker today. Today, I will talk about the anti-counterfeiting measure in Thailand. Nowadays, intellectual property infringement has become widespread, especially with the increasing development of e-commerce. Thailand is one of the countries facing the significant number of IP infringement, both physical market and online market. However, Thailand does not ignore. We are actively taking rigorous measures to prevent the infringement, whether it is prohibit the import or export the IP infringing products, and conducting the enforcement activities. Normally, the JSIP Thailand primarily collaborate with the police and the IPR owners to enforce against IPR infringement, which are divided to be in physical market and online market. Let me start with the operation in physical market. We conduct on-site inspection of the IP infringement with the police and IPR owners, serve as intermediary to ensure transparency in the inspection. This operation includes the operation at the regional level, operation in Bangkok, and the assessment at the regional level in Bangkok, which joint operation to combat economic crimes and violation in different areas. The next step is to initiate legal proceeding. IP infringing product that has been seized are handed over to the police for further action. Subsequently, the case is forwarded to the public prosecutor for order to the prosecution, and the court will then render a judgment which may include imprisonment or fines depending on the circumstance. From the data that the JSIP Thailand has been working with the 3 main offices of, namely Royal Thai Police, Department of Special Investigation, and the Customs Department, in joint mention to prevent the suppressed IP violation intensively. And in this presentation, I would like to focus on the result of the mission over the past year, from 2018 to 2023, which is January to July 2023. As follows, IP enforcement statistic table. We aim to consider and present the number of raids in case unit and the number of seizures in item unit that infringe on 3 types of IPR include trademarks, copyrights, and patents that already include PD patents. We can divide the analysis period into three interesting periods. The first period is 2018 to 2019. The second is the 2020 when the COVID-19 pandemic was the most severe. And the third period is the post-pandemic period, which is 2021-2023, which show decreasing number of raids and seizures. Let me, for the enforcement in online market, currently there are three ways for addressing online IP infringement, which are e-commerce platform, social media platform, and infringing website. The department conducts enforcement activities against online IP infringement in collaboration with the IP owners and relevant government agency. There are two measures with a legal restriction and the collaborative effort with the public-private partnership. Let me begin with the legal restriction. The website blocking is the adoption of the strengthened site blocking mechanism under the Computer Crime Act by the Working Group on Suppression of IP Violation on the Internet. This is to ensure more effective implementation of court orders issued under the Acts. Since the revised Computer Crime Act entered into force in 2017, right owners have made use of the site blocking mechanism available under the Act to combat online IP infringement. So far, courts have issued orders to block or disable access to the IPR infringing content hosted by 42 orders or 1,641 URLs. Next is going to be the notice and takedown. The new mechanism prescribed under the Copyright Act 2022, which entered into force on 23 August 2022, allow a copyright owner to take direct action against copyright work infringed on an online platform. To be clear, the copyright owner can provide a takedown notice to the service provider, and service provider will take down such infringed work based on evidence and information received. The criminal enforcement, the Royal Thai Police has provided that information that over a period of 4 years, from 2020 to 2023, which is January to August 2023, they conduct operations to apprehend IP infringement on the Internet. During this time, there were almost 1,000 cases with the total seized around 500,000 items, resulting in an estimated total damage value of over 400 million baht. As you can see, the graph shows that IP infringement rapidly declined. Let me give you the example, the statistic on the IPR enforcement on the Internet show in 2022. The Royal Thai Police conduct 343 raids and seized almost 300,000 items worth more than 180 million baht genuine goods. Or from January to August 23, the Royal Thai Police conduct 170 raids and seized around 66,000 items worth more than 25 million baht of genuine goods. The next, we are moving to the cooperation measure that involve the estimation of agreements for the protection of IP on the Internet and the agreement related online advertising and IPR. The first one is the MOU on the protection of IPR on the Internet. As you may know that the MOU, this one signed on January 2021, was initiated by the DIP and relevant agency, namely the Department of the Business Development, Department of International Trade Promotion, IPR owners, and 3 major e-commerce platforms, which are Lazada, Shopee, and the TikTok Shop, with the aim of setting up a voluntary mechanism to effectively prevent online IPR infringement and promoting awareness of IPR protection on Internet platforms. After sign of the MOU, by 26 initial signatories, we have 5 additional signatories, which are all IPR owners' representatives. In 2022, we have the Philip Morris and the TikTok Shop e-commerce platform has joined the MOU. In 2023, JD Central withdrew its signature from the MOU, so at present, there are 32 signatories to MOU. The scope of the cooperation, the role of the signatory to the MOU are, first, DIP will conduct preliminary investigation into an Internet platform, receive report about the infringement, and notify IPR's holder for further verification. For the IPR holders, will examine Internet platforms and verify facts before reporting infringement to Internet platform operators to suspend the sale of infringing products. They will also compile a list of IP assets and authorize agents to enforce current IPR, which will be provided Internet platform operators. The role of Internet platform operators will establish channel or process of receiving information about the sale of infringing products from the IPR holders or the department, and verify information to suspend the sale of infringement product on the Internet platform under their responsibility. The implementation of MOU, the result of the action to suspend the sale of IP infringing product, the data from March 11 to June 30, 2023. IPR holder reports the infringement through the designated channel or notification process, totaling 925 cases. These cases encompass various product categories such as clothing, footwear, cosmetic, automotive, music copyright, and tone cartridge. Collaborating with the Internet platform operator, the IPR owner successfully suspended the sale of infringing products on Internet platform in 921 out of the 925 cases, achieving a compliance rate of 99%. The second is the MOU on online advertising and IPR. The importance of online advertising in e-commerce today is that online advertising plays a crucial role in conducting e-commerce business. In some cases, online advertising may be related to IP infringement, whether it is advertising products or services that infringe upon IPR. The producing or disseminating advertising content that violate IPR or advertising on website or application engage in the commercial IP infringement, with a portion of their revenue coming from advertising space rental. The collaboration aims to prevent the advertising of products or services that infringe on IPR and creation or dissemination of advertising content that violates such rights. Additionally, it worked to disrupt the revenue stream of IP infringing websites or applications by refraining from advertising on these platforms. Therefore, these collaborative mechanisms are crucial in strengthening the protection of IP and reducing the issue associated with online IP infringement. The participant agency are parties is the JIP, the 3 advertising association, 21 IPR owners, and totally its signatory party are 25. The scope of the cooperation, JIP has a role in receiving information from the IPR owner regarding advertising or website or application that infringe upon IPR. It will then coordinate with the advertiser and association to remove such advertisements. Advertisers will cooperate by refraining the advertising content that infringe upon IP or other not advertised products or services that infringe upon IP and not advertised on website or application that infringe upon IP. They will also remove the advertisement from website and application when they become aware or receive notification, as well as impose policy regarding IP and disclose such policy to the public. The association will support their members in not producing or disseminating advertising contents that infringe upon IP. They will also remove the advertisement from the website and application when they become aware or receive notification. And IP owners shall cooperate by the refraining, the producing, or disseminating advertising content that infringe upon the IP of other, not advertising their own content on website or application that infringe upon IP, and remove advertisement from website or application when they become aware or receive the notification. The implementation of MOU. According to the MOU, the JIP received the list of websites infringing IPR from IP owners and sending it to IPR owners, advertisers, and associations to know and make use of such information. The IP will hold a meeting to discuss about the procedure of the MOU in the future. The signatory will also jointly review the implementation of this MOU every 6 months or as agreed by the signatories. We also have the activities against the IP infringement, such as the awareness campaign we call Let's Get Right. And also we have the ASEAN network of the IP enforcement experts we call ANI, which discuss the enforcement issue of ASEAN, and also we have the activity to increase the awareness. The next we have the IP organized destruction ceremony of the infringing goods every year. We also have organized the Thailand IP Fair in every year. The last but not least, the IP official joined the JPO and IPR training course in Japan. Thank you very much for your attention.
タンカマラス国際室長ありがとうございました。
So thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. Next speaker is Ms. Selena Dasel-Chin, Head of Legal Carousel Group from Singapore. So, Ms. Chin, floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Really good to see all of you here today in person and those attending online as well. I would like to extend my appreciation to the Ministry of Justice for the invitation to participate in this year's symposium. Thank you for the opportunity to share our efforts and insights, as well as to learn from each and every one of you here today. This forum serves as a significant platform for us to collaborate, knowledge exchange, and have collective action, and we are genuinely honored to be part of it. So a quick show of hands. Anyone here who has heard of Carousel or one of the platforms on the Carousel group? Okay, not too many, but that is great, that's great. It actually means that maybe you won't be too bored for the next few slides, and I also have the opportunity to convert all of you potentially to becoming part of our sustainability mission. So a quick overview of what I'll actually share today. It will be an introduction on the Carousel group, some of the processes that we have in place, our public and private partnerships. Won't dive too deep into this one. I think there will be a very lively discussion a little bit more at the working group sessions on this, and to share a little bit more of the challenges that we face as a platform as well. So a quick introduction to Carousel. We have 3 co-founders who actually visited Silicon Valley a few years ago, and they were very inspired by the entrepreneurial spirit in Silicon Valley. They were impressed by how people actually use technology to impact millions of lives. Upon returning to Singapore, they realized that they have many unused electronics, laptops, books that were just lying around, and many of which were impulse buys. They also realized that the process of listing these items that were unused were actually very tedious at that time. So they moved to actually develop a mobile app to simplify the act of buying and selling. They took the idea to the National University of Singapore Startup Weekend, which was a hackathon held in 2012, and Carousel was actually created. Our mission is actually to make secondhand the first choice for everyone. We are not an e-commerce company, although often categorized as one, and I will explain a little bit more later about how we are slightly different. Our belief is that everyone has things in our lives that are unutilized or underused that could benefit someone else. As such, we want to make it so instinctive for you to be able to sell these items that are underused or turn to secondhand if you do need something. Along the way, you will have the opportunity to actually prevent some of these items from ending up in the landfills and to make the world just a little bit better. 11 years on, we are now the leading multi-category platform for secondhand in the Greater Southeast Asia, and we serve tens of millions of users monthly. So what this actually means is that you yourself could actually list your property for sale, or you could also list your mobile phones or your laptops personally on our platform as well. And we couldn't have done this without the support of the government, our partners, our teammates, and our community, which is important, and that includes many of you. So some of you might see some familiar names on our investors list here. We have Rakuten as well, and Naver for those in Korea. We are serving our mission of secondhand as first choice with 8 different brands, with a spectrum of capabilities today. Hopefully some in the audience might recognize these brands back in your home country. So in Indonesia, for example, we have a partnership with Tokopedia, and we have a platform that allows the sale of secondhand mobiles called Majual. Muda and Chotut, which are the leading consumer-to-consumer marketplaces in Malaysia and Vietnam respectively, and they belong to the Carousel family since 2019. So here's a quick snapshot from 2022 that gives a rough idea of our sustainability impact. But what is more important is the tangible or more immediate impact is that this gives our community access to things that they need in a more affordable manner. So at Carousel, we actually respect the rights of intellectual property rights owners and acknowledge that there's a need to balance these rights with that of our users as well. So this is a topic that's very dear to my heart. Ms. Navarat had set the benchmark really high, keeping this under the time limit, so I'll try my best here to keep it succinct as well. And if I go too long, please let me know. So broadly speaking, these are some of the processes that we currently have in place, and I'll deep dive into one or two today. So as I shared earlier, we are largely a consumer-to-consumer marketplace where people can actually discover items and connect on our platform. Our goal in the next decade is to bring the best of e-commerce into secondhand and to make it by adding trust and convenience into our platform. And this is what we call re-commerce. We endeavor to elevate the experience and set new standards of buying secondhand and advanced re-commerce in Southeast Asia. I'll share two recent examples that we have just launched this year to give you an idea of what we're doing. So first is Carousel Certified. For those who have seen, I met yesterday, I had the honor of meeting, you'll see that I was wearing a Carousel Certified shirt. That's something new that we've launched this year, and it's called our Certified program. So what this is that we actually inspect and authenticate items, largely with higher value, so mobile phones, luxury bags, even cars that we actually do here. So our intention is to remove the fear of buying fakes or lemons by actually having experts authenticate and inspect these items. For those in Singapore, you can actually take out your mobile phones now and try and search for your favorite sneakers or Chanel bag. Otherwise, you can also see on the screen here, we have actually showcased a different user experience which is like an e-commerce-like experience on Carousel. So while counterfeits could exist in many different categories, I would like to spend a little time talking about our luxury category. So with certified luxury, we launch a brand new way of approaching second-hand luxury, wherein we solve barriers for trust and convenience for our users. So buyers can trust that their items have been inspected, authenticated as described, and that they are able to return if they actually find that anything is wrong with what they have purchased. In addition, we have also allowed for partners on our platform to actually be verified. Carousel certified partners are reputable industry experts, and they will be required to satisfy our due diligence process, amongst which this includes a pre-screen of their business registration, their identity. We also do a brand reputation check and customer reviews, and we look also on past potential violations of Carousel's terms and policies. What we aspire to do is to require our partners to maintain the same level of standards that we hold ourselves to. So as part of our certified promise, this is what we are actually promising. I won't go too deep into here. Maybe I'll share a little bit more about our authentication process. As part of our authentication process for luxury bags, the items go through a 14-step rigorous process where authentication is to ensure that the product meets what we actually require before we list it on our platform. Our authenticators have a high and deep knowledge, having worked in quite a number of the brands as well. So these are some of the tools that we actually use for the authentication. So it will be an in-hand authentication with gloves, UV lights. And I'm not an authenticator, so I'm not the expert here, but I've learned through our authenticators as well that smelling bags is actually a legitimate step they actually take. So they could be looking for the smell of glue, which could likely indicate that the item is a counterfeit. We also hold knowledge sharing sessions to learn how you yourself may be able to identify a counterfeit, and we'll be happy if any of you would like to participate in that as well. And moving on really quickly as well to our authentication process for sneakers. So similarly, we look at things like the sneakers box label, the material of the shoes, stitching, footbed pattern, logos. Again, I think smell is something that is similar for shoes as well. I've seen some of my colleagues actually sniffing the sneakers. And moving on to the next item that we actually have, which is actually our buy button, or what we call buyer protection. So for here, sellers, it's a more convenient way for them to actually sell, and a more protective way as well, where they do not need to release their personal information in the event of actually collecting payment from the sellers. Before being able to list with this buy button, there are actually certain eligibility points that you have to meet. And this is similar to like our certified partners. We require individuals and users themselves, so they need a rating, a review rating of at least 4.0, which is much on the higher end, or low order cancellation rate. So some of these requirements as well. And we hope and aspire that this will actually act as a deterrent for bad actors to use our platform to disseminate counterfeits. Moving on to takedown and reporting mechanisms. So trust and safety is a key priority for Carousel. We have been quite vigilant, or we hope, in addressing selling of unauthorized goods on our platform. We established the Carousel's Rights Owner Program, or CROP for short, as part of our Intellectual Property Rights Protection Program. So what is CROP? In building CROP, we eliminate the manual takedown process. So those who may not be aware, typically what happens is the rights owners would send a list of hundreds to thousands of URLs of potential infringing listings to the platform. And it takes some time for our moderators to actually look through it to ensure that, as I shared earlier, there's a need to balance the rights with our users as well. So there's a need for us to also ensure that these listings are legitimate in relation to IP infringements. So with this program, we have an integrity or trust that is built with all the partners on our platform, where instead of going through that manual process, it's an immediate takedown, which reduces the time of the infringing product being visible on our platform. So like I shared earlier, there's a zero processing time through CROP, and I will show right now a short clip on how this process actually happens. For those who are representing rights owners, you can reach out to me. We will onboard your partners onto CROP, and you'll be able to see that process as well. So maybe I'll just share a little bit about how CROP is working so far. So once we are able to show the slides again, so CROP is actually being used across 6 of our different markets right now. We have quite a number of brands who are already on the platform. We have Nike, Grab, or the luxury brands including Chanel, the Kering Group, which also has Gucci, Bottega, and all the other brands under their portfolio. Thank you. Okay, yes, so we are also collecting through CROP some insightful data that we will hopefully be able to use to better tackle counterfeits as well. So you can see, for example, the first listing, this is over the past 90 days, where we have, with the different brands, we are able to identify types of listings that have been taken down and which brand took down which particular listing. So as I shared earlier, please help us spread the word for this more effective way of processing takedowns. So moving on to another process that we actually have, which is the in-app user reporting mechanism. So at Carousel, we have a team of marketplace moderators to review listing content on our platform, and they will remove these items that goes against our policies. Besides that, what we feel is also very important is by working with our community. As such, we actually offer mechanisms which allows for not only rights owners but users themselves to also be able to report counterfeits easily. So we have a dedicated team to actually review these reports and to take these down promptly. So as you can see on the screen now that's playing, might not be a counterfeit Chanel bag, but showing an example of how you might actually use the app directly as a user to be able to report listings. To also improve the visibility and on how we enforce our policies, we have also implemented the support inbox feature, which you would see on the screen right now. Users can actually review a history of the reports they have actually made, and that whether or not action has been taken and the reasons for that. So I'll share a little bit more about how we utilize technology as well. So as part of our holistic approach we actually consider that prevention of scams is also instrumental in actually reducing the distribution of counterfeits via our platform. So for those of you who are aware, there are also scams that involve the sale or distribution of luxury items or counterfeit products, where bad actors frequently use these items as part of their schemes. For example, they may offer a counterfeit product at a much cheaper price to lure unsuspecting buyers. So we have a new capability in-house which allows us to configure actions on data points across the different carousel systems. So we look, for example, at like account age, chat activity, and some of these other indicators as well. And we combine them to actually derive a high level of confidence whether this user is indeed a potential bad actor. So we have risk scores based on machine learning, and investment is also made into data science capabilities to help us extend checks beyond text to images, including QR codes. So with our in-house tools, we also have together with that, we invest in third-party tools as well. So one of the partners we work with is SIF where, like I shared earlier, we are able to obtain a risk score for all our users based on this machine learning model. We stream different events in, and over time, the model actually learns whether the patterns that some of these bad actors shows, and we are able to prevent them proactively, being able to identify some of these actions before the actors are even able to be active on our platform. So they help with the identification of suspicious listings. They're also able to help us flag listings for our moderation team to review, and where we can take preemptive action on these things. So moving on a little now to public and private partnerships, I'll share a little bit on how we have been working with government authorities. You can see on the screen here. So we not only do we work with rights owners, but we also collaborate with government authorities, where we have, if you can see on the left side of the screen, we work with the authorities to actually identify categories on the platform that may have a higher amount of counterfeits, and we educate users there as well and have disclaimers here as part of our cell form. And we also partner, for example, with other authorities, not only within Singapore, we also partner with the Hong Kong Customs. So you can see here where we have seller education, safety tips as well, to educate the consumer base on the negative impacts of purchasing or selling a counterfeit item. So we believe that while platforms have a role to play in addressing counterfeits and scams, consumer education is an equally essential part of the solution. Where we have less demand for counterfeits on the platform, it actually deters these bad actors from coming onto the platform. So like I shared earlier, we have awareness campaigns for both consumers and sellers. And I'll touch a little bit more on some of the other self-regulation initiatives that we have. As I shared earlier, counterfeits exist in platforms or industries other than luxury and fashion. So we have observed that working and participating in some of these workforces is actually an effective strategy. And my learned colleague later, Vignesh, will share a little bit about SECA. So for now, I will speak about eCare, which is aimed at combating counterfeits for pharmaceuticals and drugs. So Carousel being a multi-category platform, we do have to keep up with some of these for different industries as well. So we are quite new to this journey, only been around for 11 years. So such avenues where we are able, forums for us to learn from the experience for other bigger players and platforms as well, have been very important for us, and we can consider applying these best practices to our strategies as well. So really quickly on the challenges that we have, and we will also discuss this a little bit more at the working group session. We see that counterfeiters are getting very sophisticated in their ways, and typically when we have the traditional keyword filtering, it pushes them, we get rid of the low-hanging fruits where it's more obvious, the obvious counterfeits will be taken off, and then it gets a bit trickier for us to be able to identify the bigger players who may be circumventing some of these easier keyword filterings that we have in place. So every part of our journey, we're keeping up or trying to keep up with these bad actors. So thank you for your time here today. Once again, we are grateful and genuinely honored to be able to participate in this year's symposium.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ching. Next, from Singapore, from Allen and Glidle Law Firm, lawyer Mr. Vignesh Vanam will give you a keynote speech. Mr. Vignesh, please. Mr. Vignesh, please. Mr. Vignesh, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for your invitation. It's also good to see old friends and make new ones. I hope that what I say today has interest for all of you, online and physically. And I hope to share about e-commerce platforms and counterfeit products in Singapore. Now, I think it goes without saying that it is well accepted that counterfeiting not only tarnishes and in the process dilutes brand value and therefore hurts the economic interests of IP right holders. However, it's not just the interests of IP right holders that are hurt, but the general public as well, insofar as counterfeit products have in the past also threatened the health and safety of the general public in some cases. Ms. Serena, my learned colleague, has already mentioned in the close of her presentation about counterfeit healthcare products. And that is one of the considerations that the Singapore government takes very seriously. Now, I do apologize in advance that as a lawyer, I tend to communicate only in words. I have no graphics or pictures in my slides, and I hope you bear with me. Now, today I intend to talk about these three topics: the laws against the sale of counterfeit products in Singapore, the regulation of e-commerce platforms in Singapore in respect of counterfeit products, and the role of public-private partnerships in tackling counterfeit products on e-commerce platforms. Now, the thing to remember from the start is that the laws that have always been used to deal with counterfeit products in Singapore were initially designed to deal with physical marketplaces. And in my experience, and in our court's experience in Singapore, these laws may be found to be lacking when faced with the present problem of counterfeits on e-commerce platforms. Let me elaborate. Now, e-commerce platform providers operating in Singapore are subject to Singapore laws protecting intellectual property rights. And Singapore's framework of laws protecting intellectual property rights generally makes unlawful the manufacturing and sale of counterfeiting products. Now, in the case of e-commerce platforms, I think more likely than not, we are focusing on the sale. Now, the statutes in Singapore which protect IP rights include the Copyright Act, which protects original authors' works and including artistic works, the Trademarks Act, which protects registered trademarks in Singapore, as well as trademarks which are well known, whether they are registered or otherwise in Singapore. The Registered Designs Act, which protects industrial designs and the aesthetic functions of these designs. Our Patents Act, which protects inventions, pharmaceutical inventions being one of them as well. And the Geographical Indications Act, which protects indications on a product that denotes where's the source of the product. Now, you find this most often the case in the case of edible food products like wine, and that's one of those things that one would find in e-commerce platforms in Singapore. Now, counterfeit products potentially infringe at least one of these IP rights I've mentioned above, as they copy, imitate, pass off as an authentic product without the authorization of the IP owner. Now, what's important to remember is that as e-commerce platforms typically function as a marketplace for sellers to market and sell their products, Singapore law generally does not have specific requirements unique to e-commerce platform providers to take measures against counterfeit products. And it is important, therefore, that when there's an infringement of IPR, the infringement of the IPR would attract a civil action against the IPR infringer, though in some cases it may even attract criminal prosecution. What commonly happens in Singapore is that if the state commences criminal prosecution against a counterfeit product, you can expect the IP right owner to also follow up with a civil action as well. And therefore, the IP right owners can avail themselves of the laws in Singapore protecting IP rights by taking action against the seller of the counterfeit products, not the e-commerce platform. And in such actions, the courts can award remedies such as damages, a delivery up of the counterfeit products, as well as an injunction restraining the future sale of the products. And some of the IP statutes in Singapore also include protection by way of border enforcement measures to prevent these counterfeit products from entering Singapore's borders. Our customs officers can, on their own volition and by way of information provided by the owners, examine and seize any imported or exported goods that are suspected of infringing IP rights. Now, we talked about consumer safety earlier, and so there's also some consumer protection legislation in Singapore that imposes restrictions on the sale of goods that are falsely described or advertised. One of them is the Sale of Goods Act, which states where there's a contract of sale or by description, there is an implied condition in the contract that the goods will correspond with the description. And in a more recent act in Singapore, the Consumer Protection Fair Trading Act, it is an unfair practice to deceive or mislead consumers or to make false claims. Such unfair practices may lead to civil actions from aggrieved consumers as well as face potentially regulatory action from the Competition and Consumer Commission of Singapore. Now, I touched earlier about the laws, whether there are any laws that regulate e-commerce platforms, and the answer is no, none in particular. And I mentioned that all e-commerce platforms operating in Singapore are subject to Singapore laws protecting IPR. And earlier I already mentioned that the various IP statutes render unlawful the manufacturing, sale, or copying of the respective IPR. If you were the e-commerce platform, you would be mostly and principally concerned with whether you are involved in the sale. Now, it's important to remember that for e-commerce platforms that function only as a marketplace for sellers to sell their products, Singapore law generally does not specifically require them to take measures against counterfeit products offered for sale by others on the platform. Now, these e-commerce platforms that function only as marketplaces under our law are not considered the seller of the counterfeit products, as they are merely the platform on which the buyer and the seller perform the transaction of sale. So you must remember here that under law, we'll consider the contract of sale between the seller and the buyer directly. The e-commerce platform is not involved in that contract. However, if the e-commerce platform provider adopts a more active role in the sale, they may be regarded as a co-seller of the products. So the e-commerce platform is always mindful of the relevant IP rights and applicable consumer protection laws so that they are not identified as a co-infringer or co-accused. Now, I make 2 points here, 2 observations. One is that there is a growing trend of e-commerce platforms selling products under their own house brand. And in such a case, the e-commerce platform provider will be liable as a sole infringer or sole accused of any IP infringement or consumer protection claims that arises out of the sale of products under its house brand. Moreover, if the e-commerce platform acts as a reseller of the goods, a reseller being one that purchases a good from a third party in one transaction and subsequently resells the good to the consumer in a separate transaction, this will make the e-commerce platform liable for any IP infringements and or breaches of consumer protection laws that arises from this act of resale. Now, we have a recent case in Singapore between Calvin Klein and HS International. I have the brief facts here, and I'll go very quickly. HS International was the e-commerce platform. It functioned as a platform where customers could purchase products from another e-commerce platform in China. So whenever a customer purchased products from the Singapore e-commerce platform, the e-commerce platform would first purchase the same products from the other Chinese e-commerce platform, and they would sell it on to the customer at a profit. So counterfeit goods were sold on this Singapore platform, and this Singapore platform was sued for trademark infringement by Calvin Klein, the brand owner. Now, the platform argued that it's merely a customer-to-customer platform, and it provides the customers a platform to order goods from the Chinese e-commerce platform. The Singapore High Court disagreed and held that they were liable, nonetheless, for trademark infringement. The reason being that, unlike other e-commerce platforms, where there's only one contract for sale between the buyer and seller, the business model of this e-commerce platform in Singapore meant that there were two contracts. One between the Chinese e-commerce platform and the Singapore e-commerce platform, and the second contract being between the Singapore e-commerce platform and the end customer. As such, in effect, the e-commerce platform in Singapore was selling the counterfeit products. Now, our court was motivated to make this decision because they found that the owners of the Singapore e-commerce platform were also free to set the price of the goods that they wished to sell on to the consumer in Singapore, and they could earn the resulting profit. I'm doing well for time, and this is where I intend to focus the rest of my presentation today. The role of public and private partnerships in tackling counterfeit products on e-commerce platforms. Now, we have heard from my learned colleague, Ms. Serena from Carousel, of the efforts and the self-regulating efforts that Carousel has done. And I do applaud Carousel for doing this. They're very well known for the self-help methods that they have placed on their platform. And this trend is something that I hope to see continue in Singapore and elsewhere. So there is this trend of self-regulation initiatives that we see in the platforms. And a number of them have recognized the issues that IP rights owners face with counterfeit products. And these self-regulation measures include seller verification, money-back guarantees to customers for inauthentic products. I think the Carousel example is a very good one of that. Intellectual property protection portals where the IP right owners can submit and monitor complaints against products on the respective e-commerce platforms. Now, it's important to recognize that the private sector partnerships aimed at tackling counterfeit products do exist in Singapore. I represent a number of IP right owners who do work very closely with the e-commerce platforms, and a large part of it is education. Some platforms are already well educated and well equipped to deal with counterfeit products on their own, but I believe more that the IP right owners can do to work with the e-commerce platforms because there is a shared economic interest between the two, which I'll explain later. And Ms. Serena has alluded to this earlier, and I hope I do not eat too much into what she intended to say about SICA. SICA is a Southeast Asia e-commerce anti-counterfeiting working group. And what has happened is that a number of e-commerce platforms are now a part of this grouping. And this creates a consolidated online directory for respective IPR protection policies, programs, and the tools available on all the participating platforms so that IP owners can manage and deter IPR infringing activities on the participating platforms. What is important about the SICA working group is that it encourages knowledge sharing between the e-commerce platforms, and it creates visibility for IP rights owners of the policies implemented by the e-commerce platform providers. SICA has not gone unnoticed by IP right owners that the e-commerce platforms have taken matters into their own hands to regulate themselves. And it's also important to recognize the value of public sector and private partnerships. The public sector has the capacity to create regulatory solutions, though the drawback is it's often delayed by regulatory lag. Our laws are constantly playing catch-up with the face of technological advancements. And with technological innovation in space, we see this most in the area of e-commerce. And I think you can see that in the birth story of Carousel itself and the founder's birth story of the ideas. This is something that the private sector is always a few steps ahead of the public sector. And so, to my mind, e-commerce platforms are generally always going to be at the forefront of issues that may arise from e-commerce transactions. And they will be the most informed of the trends in e-commerce, particularly in relation to counterfeit products. It's not going to be the public sector. It's not going to be the IP right owners. And effective public-private partnerships targeted at these regulatory issues or the lack of them are most effective when the partnership creates an alignment of interest between both the public and private sectors. Now in Singapore, we have an interesting case study here of a form of public and private partnership. And this is the e-commerce marketplace transaction safety rating. We tend to call this the TSR in Singapore. So what happened is this, just last year actually, our Inter-Ministry Committee of Scams, which is a committee jointly established by various Singapore government ministries, including our Ministry of Home Affairs, which is in charge of the police force, and the Ministry of Trade and Industry, they launched a TSR in collaboration with the major e-commerce platform providers. So I stress that this was a collaborative effort. And the TSR is a rating which indicates the extent to which these e-commerce platforms have implemented anti-scam measures that ensure, number one, user authenticity, number two, transaction safety. I think Carousel, presentation from Carousel, one would have heard the Carousel buy function. That is an example of transaction safety. The third is the availability of loss remediation channels for consumers. And finally, the effectiveness of their anti-scam measures. Now, it must be kept in mind that the reason why the TSR was started was because there were a number of scam cases in Singapore that arose out of transactions on e-commerce platforms. And the primary purpose of the TSR was always to minimize scams. So the Ministry of Home Affairs in Singapore, which I stress is the ministry in charge of the police force, they maintain a website which indicates the TSR rating of participating e-commerce platforms and sets out the measures that each participating e-commerce platform implements. So this is a helpful guide for consumers, the public, for which this is meant to benefit, for them to know which e-commerce platform actually meets the guidelines in the rating. Now, in order for the e-commerce platform to improve its TSR, it will have to implement measures that verify seller authenticity, monitor fraudulent seller behavior, provide secure payment options, maintain transaction records and user data, and implementing reporting and dispute resolution mechanisms. You have heard from the presentation from my learned colleague from Carousel that it has done these things already. And the standards to be met are set out in a set of guidelines published by the Singapore Advertising Standards Council. Moving forward, what I hope to see is that while the TSR and the accompanying standards are primarily targeted at reducing scams, these measures that prevent scams are set out in standards that also assist in reducing the sale of counterfeit products. For example, merchant verification, the maintenance of transaction records, and reporting mechanisms. And moving forward, the authorities, being the public sector and e-commerce platform providers representing the private interests, they have an existing basis in the TSR for which they can collaborate further to establish standards that can be implemented specifically for the purpose of reducing the sale of counterfeit products and or products that infringe IPR. They can do this either by expanding the scope of the existing standards or implementing new ones altogether. E-commerce platforms have already shown their ability to come together and self-regulate. Seeker is one of them. And I believe that they can go further and work together to formulate a code of practice that can set out uniform standards by which e-commerce platforms must comply with in order to tackle the issue of counterfeit products. This commonly agreed code of practice can then be adopted by the relevant regulatory authority and be the standard by which all e-commerce platforms will in future abide by after consultation with the relevant body in the public sector. And appropriate incentives can also be and should be provided to incentivize adoption of this code of practice. Safe harbor provisions, for example, for e-commerce platforms who have adopted a code of practice, shielding them from civil actions brought by IP rights owners. Finally, It's my view that successful public and private partnerships will require active cooperation and kick-starting from the private sector. They are the ones that know best how to start anything from the ground up. And public and private partnerships will be at their most effective where the interests of the public and private sectors are aligned and where this partnership is meant to further this common interest, the common interest being the protection of the general public. That's all I have for you today, and I hope that we enjoy the panel session later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation.